Yeah, today our first segment. We're diving into our first segment today, folks. And here's just like a little prelude, I guess. Um so for those of you who are not aware, multiple stories have now emerged talking about how Donald Trump not only idealizes Hitler, but also that he wants generals that will do exactly what they're told, like the generals Hitler had. And the right is not taking it very well, to say the least. Here's Ben Shapiro with his best defense of Donald Trump's Hitler comments, which is a picture of Donald Trump in a yarmulke. I'm sorry, but I'm supposed to now believe that Trump is a Hitlerian Nazi?
Hellos, this is the Foxes you can hear but cannot see. We would also like to sponsor your endeavor.
You're Ascended Kitten, thank you for the $5 dono. I appreciate it. Because on a personal level, I have some questions. So, he's literally trying to say, would a Nazi wear a yarmulke? And like, yeah, if it helped him become a dictator, I'm sure one of them would be able to suck it up. I think they'd be able to do that if it meant that they could become a dictator. I think they are creatures of convenience, in fact. But like this is like the level of like, well, I don't think he's a Nazi, because would a Nazi stand with Israel? And then you take a look at where all of the Nazis stand on Israel right now, and they are all incredibly pro-Israel, largely because they view it as an ethno-state, and they want their own ethno-states, and they like that it's doing a genocide of Muslims and, non-white people in their eyes. David Duke is all Jill Stein right now. Yeah, and guess who Jill Stein indirectly supports the election of? It's Donald Trump, baby. So, like, yeah, Nazis are pretty pro-Israel. I mean, like, if you just look at their outreach that they've been doing quite successfully, mind you, for like the past 8 months, many of them have been able to like whitewash their pasts as Nazis. They've been able to make people forget that they're Nazis by just being pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, whichever end of the Nazi spectrum on this issue you wind up on. They are using this issue to ingratiate themselves with different communities in order to achieve their ultimate end. So, it's almost like they're ideologically inconsistent, except when it comes to fascism. Weird. It's almost like that's a part of the ideology or something. But I figure, what better way to explore this issue than by turning to breaking points? Because of course, Crystal and Sagar had a debate over Donald Trump being compared to Hitler by John Kelly, one of Donald Trump's former top guys. So let's take a look, shall we, at this descent into horror.
Dave Weigel, there's being a lot here made of Kamala and her attack on Donald Trump in the closing days is all about character. So that has really come into focus with some more recent allegations by General Kelly, former Trump chief of staff, Kamala Harris took advantage of that at a town hall yesterday. We're going to show you more of the town hall later in the show, but we wanted to start with this part specifically. She says Donald Trump is, quote, a fascist. Let's take a listen.
We know that is why Mike Pence is not running with him again, why the job was empty. And then today we learned that John Kelly, a 4-star Marine general, who was his longest-serving chief of staff, gave an interview recently in the last 2 weeks of this election, talking about how dangerous Donald Trump is. And I think one has to think about, why would someone who served with him, who is not political, a 4-star Marine general, why is he telling the American people now? And frankly, I think of it as he's just putting out a 911 call to the American people. Understand what could happen if Donald Trump were back in the White House. And this time, we must take very seriously those folks who knew him best and who were career people are not going to be there to hold him back.
What she's talking about here is Project 2025, by the way. Project 2025's express design is to eliminate anyone who may hold the president's agenda back by installing spineless yes men who are not loyal to the Constitution or to the country, but loyal to Trump.
Quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump a fascist. You yourself have not used that word to describe him. Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. All right. So all of this comes back
Yep.
from to General Kelly, who was the chief of staff, longest-serving chief of staff under Donald Trump. A lot of these comments came to light in an Atlantic article with Jeffrey Goldberg. I will reserve some of the problems with that article for a little bit later and at least just play the audio from General Kelly himself. This was audio that he is allowed to be released from the New York Times talking about this alleged incident. Let's take a listen.
I truly did not intend to send you into a flashback of past streams. Thank you for the audio boost. Part, also, at a past restaurant job, we had no dish machine for 6 months. Then it caught fire.
Oh my God. The dish machine or the business? Either way, thank you for the $10 super chat. And you're very welcome. It's mostly just there's a limited amount of things I can do about my audio. It's not a robust audio setup, I'll say. But don't worry about it.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, sir, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that.
The implication of he would occasionally say that, meaning that he said it on more than one occasion. Like, you have the President of the United States who was on numerous occasions with his top brass talking about how Hitler did things right. And I do have to remind all of you that in the 1990s, and this is something we've known for a while now, okay? Jimmy Smith, thank you for the $2 super chat. I really appreciate it. And thank you from me and the Dono Ghost. But in 1990, Ivana Trump told her lawyer Donald Trump kept Hitler's speeches beside his bed. And
we are fewer than 30 days out from the Iowa Republican caucuses. The rhetoric is ramping up and in some cases getting uglier. During a recent campaign stops in New Hampshire and Nevada, former President Donald Trump stoked fears about undocumented immigrants coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. Par for the course since the day he rode down the escalator and declared himself a candidate for president back in 2015. But the themes and choices of his words this weekend are significant. The former president again repeating language that echoes white supremacists. Trump saying that illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our country. And on Sunday, that migrants are invading from foreign.
By the way, they're poisoning the blood of our country is basically a direct quote from Hitler's speeches.
Prisons and mental institutions. Suffice to say, he offered no proof for any of that. Among others, former New Jersey governor and Trump GOP rival Chris Christie called Trump disgusting and his words dog whistling. The Biden campaign, meantime, responded to those poisoning comments, saying that Donald Trump parroted Adolf Hitler. Now, is that a fair comparison? Let's dig deeper. About 15 years before he systematically murdered millions of people, Hitler put that phrase in Mein Kampf, quote, "Great civilizations died out as a result of contamination of the blood," calling it a poison to the national bloodstream and infecting public life. Quote, "Great civilization."
One upon a midnight shimpy, while I pondered Trump and BB over many a quaint and curious volume of Jimmy Dore.
Salmon Moose, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. I very, very much appreciate that. Thank you so goddamn much. But yeah, it's less common now, though. You can still sometimes hear it in the rhetoric. But the comparison of you might have heard the term the body politic. It kind of comes out of, or gained a lot of steam from the eugenics movement. And the idea being that, you know, a good and healthy body is a pure body, and that foreign invaders contaminate the body politic. So you get this idea of like the nation as an organism, and, you know, invaders to that organism being infections or tumorous. And this leads in turn to a lot of dehumanizing language around that concept. And that was used to great effect by Hitler in his writings and speeches. And Donald Trump is basically doing the exact same thing in 2024, and people are falling for it all over again. We really did learn nothing from World War II.
Died out as a result of contamination of the blood, calling it a poison to the national bloodstream and infecting public life. Hitler was warning about German blood being, as he described it, poisoned by Jews at his prior event in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and by the way, at the time Hitler was writing, a lot of people viewed Jews as foreign invaders. They did not recognize Jewish people as like fellow citizens or fellow countrymen. They viewed them as essentially a blight, like a plague of locusts that might be forced out of town and, you know, turned into diaspora over and over and over again because Jewish people were that level of marginalized. Like the Romani, similar to the Romani, Mr. Miyagi, but the Romani were much more mobile. You know, they would typically move around, kind of taking their homes with them, as it were. Whereas, and this is me oversimplifying, because obviously there would be overlap or, you know, whatever. But Jewish people would tend to settle down in like a cheap end of town, establish themselves for like a generation or two, and as soon as they started to become a bit more profitable or stable, often would face pretty severe pushback, if not expulsion. So, which the Romani would also face too. Like, I'm not trying to say they didn't. It just manifested slightly differently because of cultural differences. When Donald Trump describes immigrants from Latin America and South America as a poison to the blood of our country, he's doing the exact same thing that Hitler did. And he's saying it in almost exactly the same way.
Last month, Trump also used the word vermin to describe his political rivals. Comments that were condemned by President Biden, as well as language you heard in Nazi Germany. Now, is that an accurate claim? Hitler's Nazi Party came to power partly by pounding the idea that the German government was being overrun by Marxists, something that Trump has suggested now is happening in the United States for years. When he wrote about rooting out
one of his top guys, Matt Miller, is a huge proponent of this idea.
Marxists and Jews, Hitler wrote, quote, "There was time enough at home at least to exterminate this vermin." The Trump campaign did respond to criticism over his speech this weekend, saying that Trump's speech was great. They previously shot down that vermin comparison this way: "Those who try to make that ridiculous assertion are clearly snowflakes, grasping for anything because they are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome." And they added this: "Their sad, miserable existence will be crushed when President Trump returns to the White House." An interesting choice of words there.
Yeah. They're trying to make it very apparent what they will do when they get into power, and it is bleak for any kind of resistance to any potential dictatorial rule.
Brianna.
Certainly. And here's the thing, Trump's interest in Hitler and Nazi Germany, it's not a recent development. Several journalists have documented it. Michael Bender of the Wall Street Journal wrote in his 2021 book about how in 2018, Trump told his then chief of staff, retired four-star General John Kelly, as Kelly was explaining to Trump who the allies and enemies were in both world wars, quote, "Well, Hitler did a lot of good things," praising the Fuhrer for his economic policies. Now, Kelly pushed back as Trump reportedly persisted speaking positively about Hitler. Trump later denied making those comments.
Yeah, so keep in mind that this was in the middle of one of the most highly decorated generals in the U.S. military having to explain in painstaking detail to Donald Trump who was good and who was bad in World War II.
But in 2022, Susan Glasser and Peter Baker wrote in their book, The Divider, about how Trump, frustrated by his military leadership, exclaimed to Kelly as well, "You effing generals, why can't you be more like the German generals?" "Which generals?" Kelly asked. "The German generals in World War II," Trump responded. "You do know that they tried to kill Hitler 3 times and almost pulled it off," Kelly said. But Trump insisted, no, they were totally loyal to him. That model of the Third Reich, bastardized as it was how Trump wanted the American military modeled, the book claims. But this isn't new as well.
I don't know if Trump's dad was German, but I do know that Fred Trump was almost certainly like a Nazi or an American Nazi or a member of the KKK. He was arrested at a KKK riot, but denied being part of the KKK. So, yeah.
Rewind all the way back to 1990 when Vanity Fair reported that Trump's former wife, the late Ivana Trump, had told her lawyer that Donald Trump occasionally read from a book of Hitler's collected speeches, My New Order, which he supposedly kept in a cabinet by his bed. And a friend of Trump.
Yep. He would literally keep a book of Hitler's speeches next to his bed. You don't do that for a book you just kind of are interested in.
Told the magazine on the record that he had given Trump the book, saying he thought Trump would find it interesting. Now, Trump denied this, saying, quote, "If I had these speeches, and I'm not saying that I do, I would never read them."
You ran against him. You had multiple debates against him.
No, we're good. We're good. We don't need that. We don't need Hillary Clinton. We're good. But like, this is a guy who very clearly idolizes Hitler, but also is painfully aware that if he goes public with that, it's basically game over for any kind of political career. You know, his saving grace right now is essentially that he has plausible deniability because his cult won't question his his word, essentially. So yeah, just worth remembering on this one.
What would he say when you would lay that out to him?
You just, that'd be the end of the conversation usually. Certainly, the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian. Admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
Why are some Reddit leftists not taking Project 2025 seriously? Because a lot of Reddit leftists don't take politics very seriously. You know, they view it as a team sport. It only matters to them in the context of their social relationships with other people, in, making them look good or knowledgeable about what's going on. That being said, there's also a branch of online leftists that thinks that, well, things can't get any worse because we're currently under fascism with Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris is a fascist, and Donald Trump is a fascist, and so the fascism really can't get any worse than it is right now. And I need to really clarify here, it absolutely can. If you think what we are under right now is fascism, well, then I guess Donald Trump represents super fascism. Because what we're living under now is like neoliberalism. Like that's what Joe Biden brings to the table. Donald Trump would bring fascism to the table. And that is an incredibly different beast. You can go out right now and protest against Joe Biden. In a Trump America, he's going to make that as hard as possible for you by blackbagging you if you're a protester. And we know that because that's what he did last time. He wanted to do it, but people in positions of power stopped him from fully implementing this idea. They're not going to be there to stop him this time. Yeah, neoliberalism sucks, but it's not fascism.
If he was left to his own devices, would he be a dictator if he didn't have people around him?
Oh, I think I think he'd love to be. I think he'd love to be just like he was in business. He could tell people to do things and they would do it, and not really bother too much about whether what the legalities were and whatnot.
All right, so there you go. Do we want to react to this, Crystal, before we play this? She made a big moment about this. Is a press conference yesterday at the vice presidential residence. We were on pins. We're like, oh, what is it? It could be something big. She's going to come out. She's doing a press conference. She almost never does a press conference. Didn't end up taking any questions. It was only like maybe a few minutes recounting these comments. But what we seem to take away is that because that article had come out from The Atlantic, there was not as much media coverage, I think, as the Democrats would have liked about it. So she was trying to force the conversation, both with, I think, the fascist term and then also trying to get people, I guess successfully, for us to talk about it, because that is her closing argument now with 12 days to go. It's full-on character, January 6th, dictatorship. I mean, listen, I think it's been tried before. I don't think it's going to work, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, it did work in 2022.
I mean, yeah, but he wasn't on the ballot. So,
I
like,
mean,
and that's what I just keep going back
So let
to.
me just say,
He wasn't on the ballot.
my
Yeah.
own political bias is that this is not a smart strategy.
Mhm.
That is my bias, is to buy into the research that Matt Cart brought us on the show that shows that, you know, the most effective messaging with swing voters in the state of Pennsylvania is about populist policies and progressive economics. I do have to say, I think her closing ads that Weigel referenced when we just talked to him focused on taxes and Trump being for the billionaires. I do think that that is an effective pitch. And so my political bias is to look at this and go, listen, people who think this, who think Trump is a fascist, in my opinion, accurately, they are already in your camp. You're not really persuading anyone. But, you know, I have to say, like, I was wrong in 2022, so I do have some humility about my own assessments.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of pick up here because I actually think it is a good strategy, largely because what Kamala's campaign seems to be focusing on in the lead up to the election is eroding Donald Trump's base of support. And by shining a light on the fact that, like, he had Hitler speeches on his bedside, according to his ex-wife, that he had, he repeatedly talked about how Hitler did things right while president. I think that is also good. I think it spurs turnout for sure. I think people hear that and they're like, "Oh, there is skin in this game." You know, there is a meaningful distinction here. And also, I think it reaches boomers who might be in Trump's camp otherwise, and it makes them go, Wait, really? He's saying things that Hitler said in his speeches?" And among the boomer class, you know, they grew up watching World War II reruns, you know, reruns of like Looney Tunes from, you know, the war days. They grew up watching, the great cinematic masculine heroes of the past play courageous World War II commandos or flying aces or whatever. You know, they grew up inundated with this media, and being able to associate to Trump's core base, which is the elderly, mind you, being able to make this association gives a lot of older people who might otherwise be either politically disengaged or just kind of like, "Oh, Trump was so great last time, we're gonna get him elected again." And then they're like, "Oh, wait, what's all this about a fascism? He was saying Hitler quotes. Oh, my stars and garters. Well, I can't even bring myself to vote for him anymore." And, you know, then they don't vote. Or they vote, you know, their conscience and like go to the polls, but only vote everyone down ballot of Donald Trump. Or, you know, this might not be an ideal strategy to, you know, mobilize younger voters. But I think that Kamala Harris is kind of, and her campaign at large is gambling right now that they already have younger voters, for all intents and purposes, as wrapped up as they're going to get. And so instead, what they're focusing on is degrading Donald Trump's base of support, which, by the way, has been working. Let me just pull this up here. Where can I find this? God sinner.
Between new meds and my father ranting about Harris, it's nice to catch yours and other leftist streams. It has been painful last few months, but y'all help me feel like I can breath. From Caracal. P.S. Did I miss Ted fanfics?
You did not miss Ted Cruz fanfics. We might break that out again during Election Day because it's going to be a long stream. But thank you for the $20 super chat. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, YouTube chat. You guys coming through for me today. Let's see. I want something recent. All of these are from past month here. Where can we get this? Oh, God. Where could this be? Okay, we are not getting what I need with this Google search. Thanks, Google search engine, for being so much worse than you used to be. Let's see. No, 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 no. Yeah, I think Kamala knows what she's doing. Yeah, like there's a strategy here. I think it's not. It's not the let me put it this way. It's not the strategy I would go with, but I do think it has an upside. I do think it might be successful here. Can I find this here? Yeah, here we go. This is the segment I was looking for.
Looking at different voting groups and what some of the polling shows us with them. Today we have a really important one for Donald Trump. With me, CNN senior data reporter, professor of numbers, Harry Etten. When we talk about Donald Trump, from the beginning of Donald Trump as a political figure, non-college white voters who did not go to college have been one of his key demographics.
It's been a key demographic for him. It's been his base. And this is what's so interesting, because we've seen so many groups this year moving in Donald Trump's direction. So you would think his core group, his base of support, would be doing the same. But in fact, it's moving a little bit away from him. So this is Trump's margin with non-college white voters. Unlike most voting blocks, this group is not moving towards him. It's actually moving slightly away. So you go back.
Like, I mean, I feel like you almost don't need like the words on this one, guys. Donald Trump's key demographic is white dudes. You know, white dudes and, you know, white ladies who haven't gone to college. And in that demographic has slipped by 4 points from 2020 to 2024. It slipped by 6 points from 2016 to 2024. That is a huge number of people. That is a huge number of people. And like, it might not like 4%, like how many people could that be? Here, let's take a look here. All right. Trump non-college white vote 2020. Okay. Let's take a look here. Pew Research. Yeah. White voters without a college degree were critical to Trump's victory in 2016 when he won the group by 64% to 28%. Now, I'm going to look up what is the total white non-college vote 2020. I want to know, well, like, how many votes does that translate into? Let me see if I can find that. I mean, guys, what we're looking at here is like seriously like hundreds of thousands of votes either switching or just evaporating for Donald Trump. And he only won in 2016 by like a slim margin, okay? Let's see. Turnout surged. Okay, all white. So God. Here, let's take a look. Yeah. All right. White non-college. So, white and non-college. What was it in 2024 or 2020 rather? Come on. Okay. God. Okay. White non-college. Democrat versus Republican. So white non-college in 2027. 2020, rather. God. Was 37%. So just using that as a baseline, guys. Like if it actually shifted by as much as it has in this one demographic, like Kamala Harris wins handily. Like if it's even a 2% change in this one demographic, Kamala Harris wins. And we're looking right now at a 4% change. We're looking at a 4% change. At a 4% change on this, okay? Rather, a 3% change. Like, you know, we get into wacky territory where like Florida might flip. We get into some really wacky territory, guys. If Trump's college or non-college white demographic drops, we get into some really wacky territory. Thank you for this, Gamer G. I'm going to play around with it more.
Most voting blocks, this group is not moving towards him. It's actually moving slightly away.
Hey,
so you go back 8 years ago, he won him by 33. You go back 4 years ago, he won him by 31. Now what we look is we see that in the latest average of polls, he's only up by 27. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but given that we're seeing these double-digit gains...
What demographic? White non-college age, or white non-college voters.
Among black voters or among Hispanic voters in some of the polls, the fact that we're seeing this core group of supporters actually moving away from him, not just off of the 2016 baseline, but...
No, this is from N10's aggregate, which... Like, this guy is like CNN's polling whiz. He's actually fairly good at what he does.
The 2020 baseline as well, I think that's a rather interesting development.
Shrinkage, as Donald Trump might say, based on what he said the last few days. Why could even a small difference with this group matter?
Why can a small difference with this group matter? Because look at what percentage of the electorate that they make up. So we can look nationally, right? Look at this. Non-college white voters make up 40% of the electorate. That's more than college whites at 29%. All other groups, voters of color at 28%. So this is something that we've seen throughout the board, right? Which is that Donald Trump is making huge gains with groups that make up a smaller percentage of the electorate while he's losing a little bit. But these groups that he's losing a little bit of make up a much larger portion of the electorate. But more than that, you know, we're talking about the US of A, where they make up 40%. Why don't you go to those key Great Lake battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? They have...
By the way, just to put this in perspective, 40% of the electorate is 61,840,000 votes. It is tens of millions of votes. So if you change that by even, like, you know, 1% when it comes to turnout, you're looking at colossal sea changes in what the political landscape is. So this is why I think Kamala Harris has been focusing on peeling off boomers and peeling off this core non-college white demographic. You know, and it's frustrating because as leftists, we want the language to reflect our politics. But we have to understand the game that she is playing right now is not intended for us. It's intended for people who are low information voters.
Outsized import in those Great Lake battleground states. Non-college white voters, look at this. They make up the slim majority of voters at 51%, way more than college whites at 30%, way more than all other voters at 16%. So if you're seeing movement in the Great Lake battleground states among non-college whites, that could be a very big development, John.
Are we seeing movement in the battleground states among non-college whites?
Nothing quite like a leading question, my dear friend. Yes. We are. We're seeing the same pattern in the Great Lake battleground states.
This, by the way, I think is a good bit of info to have that gives me a bit more trust in the numbers that they're putting together here. This is like when you're able to like duplicate a pattern like this, it makes the data at least seem higher quality. Let me put it that way. Hey, Ellie Moob. So the pattern repeating both at the national level and the state level is good news, and it also could mean that we're going to be seeing a big shift when it comes to swing states, but particularly in this, you know, working class non-college white demographic
that we're seeing nationally. That is small.
It gives me confidence
among non-college white voters. Again, you see it back in 2016, Donald Trump won them by 25. You see a small movement in 2020, Donald Trump winning them by 22. And look at that, what we are.
But again, it's a shift of like 3% from 2016 to 2020. And 3% from 2022 or from 2020 to 2024. Like, that is a shift overall of 6%. And he didn't win the last election, guys. He came close, but he didn't win. And if he's slipping in one of the largest demographics by an additional 3%, he's basically doomed. He's a dead campaign walking. you know? Which I think is incredibly heartening. Good night, Andrew S.
Today. Again, Trump is ahead, but his margins are smaller. And when you have a shrinking margin for Donald Trump among his core group that makes up the majority of voters, it can make up for big shifts among smaller groups of the electorate. And this is why Kamala Harris is still in the ball game right now. It's because even though she's losing big league among groups that make up a small portion of the electorate, and she's making it up among groups that make up a big portion of the electorate, even if the movements are small. But it's clear here.
That is very interesting. That is.
Yep, I agree. That is very interesting. All right. However, let's get back to this. We got sidetracked a bit.
So let me talk about the political strategy a little bit, and then we can also talk a little bit about the substance here. On the political strategy, Weigel mentioned something that hadn't really occurred to me, which is that it's her doing
the subtext. It's just text. The text of it is that Donald Trump is losing in the key demographic he has always had on lock. And if he loses that much more, or even as much as what we're seeing in the current polling, like, he's done. But that's the thing, Star Bunnies. The point being made here about the polling is that she might be losing with certain groups of people. She might be losing support from those groups. But she's gaining when it comes to that much larger demographic. That's the calculation she's made. That's why her campaign is going in the direction it is. It's because they're banking on peeling off this support from Donald Trump on his key demographic. So it's not losing overall. No, that's the thing. She is losing in core demographics, but she's not losing in the biggest one, and that biggest demographic, winning that over is a huge, huge deal that basically kills Republican chances of getting the White House. And she's losing support among Arab voters for sure, or Middle Eastern voters, or Muslim voters. But they're a much smaller percentage of the population of the country. So the calculated risk that she's taking is that alienating these groups, they're going to be posed the question of whether or not they're going to vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and most of them are not going to go vote for Donald Trump. And if she can peel off 3 or 4% from Donald Trump's white non-college demographic, then she basically wins. She it's over. She won. But best case scenario would be to go into the election, with the support of all minority groups, and also peel off Trump support. But she's decided to play a dangerous game, I guess. And if those white non-college votes go down ballot, that's the thing I would be curious about, Dragonfly. I wonder if it translates to down ballot Dem for white non-college vote, or if they just, I think it's much more likely they just don't show up at all. But if she's actually getting converts out of that group, then it's a completely different ballgame for the Senate. Absolutely.
Doing this big press conference yesterday at the vice presidential residence, her plan to do the
Michaela Rose 420.
the big closing speech in the Ellipse, where January 6th occurred. This is, yes, it's about the message itself, but it's also about, I look presidential. You can imagine me in this role.
Oh, the headline says he'll rule like dictator. Praised Hitler, yeah.
And they feel like that is still a question that remains for some voters who don't like Trump, but are not sure that they're ready to vote for Kamala Harris. And that kind of...
Well, John Bogardus, the breakdown that we just saw of where this shift is happening is both on a national level, but also is reflected in the swing state demographic. So it looks like swing states are also seeing this, lowering of support among the white non-college age demographic, why do I keep saying college age? The white non-college demographic. I really hate these calculated risks. Me too. I would love to be so much more confident.
Landed with me as like, oh, that's an important part of what they're doing here. Trump is trying to go hang out with the bros. And
there's also the fact that the COVID demographic shift that affected 2022 a lot. Yeah, crazy grape. Absolutely. First of all, thank you for jumping over to the Riverboat site. But also, yeah, COVID decimated the Republican population. So like we're seeing multiple shifts when it comes to how big Donald Trump's base of support is, and his support when it comes to one of his largest supportive groups. And that is definitely going to buoy Kamala's chances in the coming race.
Say, look, I'm not the scary, dangerous character that they're painting me out as. Here I am hanging out. Like, how scary can I really be? And her focus in the waning days is envision me as president. And look, we haven't ever had a female president before. And she has been knocked rightly at plenty of times as kind of a lightweight. So that kind of landed for me as part of the thinking going into this. In terms of the messaging, their theory, which again goes against my own views and instincts on these things, but hey, you never know, maybe they're right. Their theory is that there exists a quote unquote shy Kamala voter who is a kind of like the Nikki Haley voter, right? Who is a conservative woman who has voted Republican most of her life, whose husband is likely voting for Donald Trump, and who is in a lot of circles in her community where everybody is basically a Republican and supporting Trump. And she really can't come out publicly and say she's supporting Kamala Harris, and maybe needs a little bit of a reminder of, this is who this guy is. Remember January 6th? Look at the people who served with him. Mattis, Milley, now Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I think Crystal's bringing up an additional point here of like bringing in Republicans to basically say, hey, Donald Trump is a fascist. Hey, he's a threat to our democracy. Hey, he's taking away your right to, control your body. Hey, he, like getting Republicans to do the punching as opposed to Kamala Harris going out and doing the punching is helping to peel this support and make inroads with these, people who would otherwise vote Republican, but and are surrounded socially by other Republicans, but just can't stomach the idea of voting for the guy that took away the right to their, to their uterus. Like I think that this is another aspect of this demographic shift that's going to help Kamala Harris.
All coming out and saying, hey, I was in the room with this guy. Like, I actually saw how he operates. And yeah, your worst fears that he is actually a fascist are true. And by the way, yes, okay, plenty of bad things did happen last time around, but the Republic did not end.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, Alan Vindel. The thing is, it's hard to argue with the fact that, like, the demographic shifts around Donald Trump's support are happening. And if you are Kamala Harris's campaign team and you think you have any shot of peeling away an additional 1 or 2% of that core demographic, you're salivating at that prospect, and you're gonna do anything and everything you can to facilitate that, which has led to this unholy alliance, I think, with like the Cheneys, for example. This is, it's an inelegant way of trying to do that with the short amount of time they have. And so I think that, like, while this sounds insane to us, to an extent, I kind of attribute that to us living in kind of our leftist bubble, as opposed to, what Republicans are out there thinking, right? If you're a median voter who's leaning Republican, right? What do you believe in? You know, what's gotten through to you in this election cycle so far? You might still be on like Bud Light is bad, but you can't remember the reason why. You might remember that Kamala Harris is a woman. Donald Trump, you know, we had some good times with him, but you know, he's saying some weird stuff now. You know, it was pretty weird when he danced on stage the other day for 40 minutes. How are you seeing 3D chess moves, but not other left streamers? I mean, the thing is, I believe that Kamala Harris's campaign team is out of touch. But they might be out of touch in a way that allows them to see, you know, we don't have access to their internals, which they, you know, each campaign does internal polling of its own that they rely on. And so they're trying to appeal to lowest common denominator Republican voters that are leaning towards Kamala Harris. And those people do exist, and they're banking on the fact that 1 or 2% of those people will move over. And that 1 or 2% represents hundreds of thousands of votes. Every percentage they pull off of that demographic is hundreds of thousands of votes. Okay? Here, just to hammer this home, right? We established that in 2020, the number of white non-college voters was 61,840,000, right? Okay.
They're not out of touch, they're out of time. Thoughtful face.
Let's just say, for the sake of ease, 61 million. What is just 1% of 61 million? That is 610,000. If you strip an additional 1% of the vote from Donald Trump, you strip 610,000 votes. If you strip 2%, that's 1.2 million votes right there. With the margins he was operating on in 2020, there is no way he survives 1.2 million people less turning out to vote for him, even if those votes don't translate into Kamala Harris votes. Even if it just translates into people not, 1 or 2% not showing up to the polls. That is, again, game changer. Big Roy, thank you for the $10 super chat. They're not out of touch, they're out of time. I have seen Nick of Time as well. Great thriller. Here we go.
But guess what? This time, we're not going to be there. It's going to be all the loyalists. They're going to use, Schedule F to dismantle the administrative state. So whatever institutions and checks and bulwarks were...
It's not 3D chess. It's just that they have internal polling. And one of the things that they've been seeing is this degradation of support in this key demographic. And it's not 3D chess. They're just trying to continue that or accelerate that process as much as they can before Election Day. It's not 3D chess. It's actually a very simple plan.
Inhibitors were there last time are going to be gone. And it's just going to be, there's a whole project, concerted project. That's the real takeaway from Project 2025. There's a concerted project to make sure that none of those restraints from last time are in place. So that's their theory of why they're leaning into this messaging, because they think, number one, Kamala needs to put herself in these sort of...
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is they probably look at, minority groups that have been put off from voting for Kamala Harris, and they have essentially decided that they're a lost cause and that outreach to them will not work or will not be a use of their time that will help them electorally. And unfortunately, I think that they obviously should. I think that obviously she should come out in support of a ceasefire. But you know, and like and an end to arms to Israel. But realistically, we're not going to get that. We're not going to get that. If we do get it, it's going to be like day one when she's president, not announcing it in the lead up to the election. You know, I was saying, well, maybe she'd announce the week before the election. I don't think we're going to actually see that. That was really wishful thinking on my part. But what I do think we'll see is flexibility begin to appear as she prepares to take the presidency, largely because I don't think she is ideologically a Zionist, unlike Joe Biden. I think she is currently a Zionist of convenience. I don't think that she is ideologically aligned with Zionism, but, you know, I've been wrong before, so, you know, maybe I'm wrong on that one. But my hope is that if she wins, we will quickly see her using her powers to put pressure on Israel, because it is a losing prospect. And I have a feeling it is an, let me put it this way. Supporting Israel is in the long term is a losing prospect electorally. I don't think it's not going well right now in this election. It's not going to get any better going forward. And I also think after this election, we will Democrats largely will not be under threat from AIPAC, and we'll begin to see like a decoupling process take place between Democratic politicians and those particular vehicles for funding.
Of like presidential settings and prove herself there as this like tough, credible leader. And number two, because Trump's approval ratings have ticked up a bit, you need to
So you think she's just towing the line for now? I mean, I think that she's always just towing the line. I don't think Kamala Harris is ideologically really anything. She's a politician that goes with the wind, and like, I think that is ultimately good for where we're at right now. I think that like her being easily influenced by public opinion is going to be a through line of her presidency. And my hope is that she will be influenced by public opinion to bring an end to the conflict between Israel and Palestine.
Remind people of what it was that they found most disturbing about him last time that he held the office, and make the case that next time around he would actually be worse.
Yeah, I think that's the only interpretation we can come away from. I feel.
Do you think Kamala will change the stance on Israel? I think that it's possible. I don't know if she will. I'm obviously just speculating. I have no secret info that other people don't have access to. But given her performance as a politician going back as long as we can see it, and now like she's pragmatic. She goes with what is successful, kind of like Obama. Obama was not supportive of gay marriage until the second the Supreme Court legalized it, and it became popular. And once it became popular, Obama was very pro-gay marriage. In a similar way, I think that we're going to see that play out with Kamala Harris on a variety of issues. But I think that also includes Israel. If Kamala wins, do you think we can rest for a minute? No. God, no. If anything, once Kamala wins, we have to protest harder. We have to organize harder. You know, like that will be the time, you know, when she becomes president and you can stand up at one of her appearances and protest for Palestine, you should. Because how she reacts to that and how she reacts to increasing pressure when she's in office will be extraordinarily telling. And we need to push her as hard as we can once she's in office. because that will be when we can exert the most, political pressure on her. She will have the most political capital to actually do something about it. And as a result, we should push her hard. Yeah, let me put it this way. The night of the election, we can take it easy. Once the Electoral College weighs in, we can breathe a long sigh of relief. We can take the next day to recuperate from our hangovers, and then we can get down to brass tacks, critiquing and protesting Kamala Harris. Also, that is kind of the Star Buddies is spot on in YouTube chat. You never get to rest again. Once you become a leftist, that is true. You never get to rest again. Because to rest, to be complacent, to check out, those are kind of luxuries, and they're luxuries we can't really afford because we're not in a dominant position. So let's continue pushing for the best we can get, even after Kamala is elected, because we need to thwart fascism's rise, and we need to get someone into a position of power who will actually maybe be willing to change a stance on the genocide in Gaza. And if Donald Trump wins, that's absolutely not going to happen. He's literally just going to throw a brick on the accelerator of the death engine, okay? If Kamala Harris wins, there is a slim chance we might be able to do something about it. And I'll take that slim chance over none at all.
So distanced from this campaign. Usually I can feel and understand why people are doing what they're doing. Back in 2020, the Biden basement strategy, criticized it a lot, obviously, on empirical merit, but it was the correct strategy, right? It was obvious. This one, I just don't get it. I mean, I understand the 2022 thesis. I understand that coalition, they really believe they can bring it out. But in an era where Donald Trump increased the amount of votes that he got by almost...
Is it okay to rest between panic attacks? Yes. And also, if you need to just stare at a wall for a while and dissociate, go for it.
Almost 10 million in 2020, has always had a track record of driving out these lower propensity voters and shaking up the political establishment. Maybe there's not evidence for it, but there's been so many polling misses, and there's still so many things that could happen. Nobody saw the Latino shift in Texas and elsewhere happening back in 2020. It was a shock on election night. It was one of the biggest shocks I experienced. I don't know. I mean, maybe. It's one of those where, is it really going to land? It just seems so played out, so driven home by the media. To me, I called it on Twitter the Jennifer Rubin campaign. To me, it really is the apotheosis of this Jennifer Rubin media critique that the media actually doesn't talk enough about how Trump is a fascist. I saw yesterday, it was Van Jones was Kamala has to be flawless while Donald Trump is lawless. And yet, yeah, I know. But went on his Instagram and he's it's feeling like 2016 again. You got to get out there and vote. We're looking down fascism in the barrel. And the whole country experienced 2017 to 2021 when Trump was actually president. None of that stuff happened. Their argument is, well, it'll be different this time.
Well, none of it happened. Well, yeah, they didn't have a concerted plan by all of the major lobbyist groups and think tanks in Washington to solicit an entire administrative network to replace the existing bureaucrats on day one. Yeah, it is different. It is actually different this time.
Around. But
they got the poster boy for Project 2025 into the vice president's seat. What are you talking about? It is certifiably different.
People look back on those years actually quite fondly. And then even with Trump people himself, a big criticism, including mine, would be that he did have people like General Kelly, Mattis, and others who didn't agree with him on anything, and who at many times actively thwarted a lot of his better orders, like to withdraw from Afghanistan or whatever. So I just look at it as very different from theirs. Of course, they're not trying to win me over. That coalition, I just keep thinking, aren't these people Harris voters already? Aren't they already Democrats? Who is being convinced by this? But look, if they win by one in all the blue wall states, I'll say it right here, they were right.
Can I just point out one more thing? that is symptomatic of this demographic shift that I've been talking about throughout this this video. The Democratic Party views Florida as being in play. And the only way you get Florida in play is by peeling off this core demographic of white non-college graduates. You know? That is the way you get Florida into play. And hey, guess what? That is in fact what you see happen when you shift just like 1 or 2 percentage points more from that particular demographic. You suddenly get Harris winning Florida by 0.5%. You know, like it is possible that what we're seeing right now is a sea change. I don't think that we'll see Blexis, blue. I don't think we'll see Texas going blue, but I do think that Colin Allred has a really good shot of unseating Ted Cruz. I do think that we can start seeing Texas turn officially purple, and that is going to be really cool to see. So that's really what I'm trying to convey here. I mean, like, this is pretty astounding from back in September. Florida is in play, said DNC chair Jamie Harrison. Florida, Florida, Florida. For the first time in 30 years, you have Democrats running in every seat in the state house, the state senate, and at the congressional level. Yeah, Donald Trump only won the state by about 3 percentage points in 2020, which, again, if he's losing on his largest demographic by 3 points, currently, if they can shave off another 1 or even 2% of that support by election day, you just won Florida. So that is exactly what the Kamala Harris plan has been. Didn't Florida used to be blue? Yes. Florida has gone red the last couple of elections, but Florida was considered a purple state for a long time. It's been historically kind of this swing state. So I think that we have a shot here to see some really big changes. We could be looking at like Kamala Harris sweeping with like almost 350 electoral votes, which would be crazy. But we'll see. Fingers crossed for that outcome. Okay, let's actually get to this content. I've been talking too much about these numbers.
Difference between 2020 and now is that in 2020, January 6th hadn't happened.
Yeah, true.
So it was.
I mean, in 2020, January 6th hadn't happened, and COVID was actually just starting, and like a lot of demographic shifts have happened between 2020 and 2024 in regards to COVID, in regards to, election denialism becoming so widespread and rampant. It's going to depress the conservative voter turnout. We still had Roe in 2020. Like the sea changes in like voter behavior and attitudes toward a Trump administration, it's gonna be big, and I don't know that any of the polling right now really captures how big that could be.
You could point to, like, Trump did weaponize the Department of Justice against, launching investigations against John Kerry and against Comey, and it's not like there was nothing you could point to, but there was nothing as shocking as what happened on January 6th. And, and now we've learned more and more details about, no, he really was serious about, for example, calling the military in to shoot protesters in the legs during the Black Lives Matter protest. He really was serious about.
And also, he's now going on the campaign trail and talking about how we need to have a national crystal knocked where the police can, do one terrible violent day of violence to round up immigrants.
about these plans to attempt to like use the National Guard to seize ballot boxes. He really did try to overturn the election using these fake elector slates. We really did watch a crazed mob run around the Capitol calling for his own vice president to be hanged, and him sit back and, you know, allow it to happen, if not be actively like in support of that sentiment. So, you know, that is a significant shift from where we were back in 2020, which even in 2020, obviously he lost. So even before people had.
Hey, Amber Brains, thank you.
I like you, Crazy Grape. You seem like good peeps. Also,
Amber Brains, thank you for gifting a sub to Crazy Grape.
Had that incredibly jarring experience. So again, my instinct is similar to yours, Sagar, and it was in 2022, to be like, I don't know why you're focused. Like, to me, I think this is important, right? I think actually the argument is correct that, you know, all of any sort of institutional guardrail and check that was in place that checked his worst instincts last time around, they have made a concerted effort to dismantle those. You also have a Supreme Court decision basically saying, hey, whatever you do in office, basically you're immune. Like, you can do basically whatever you want. So it is a different landscape in that regard. That resonates with me. My instinct is to say you were better off when you were framing him as like weird versus this, you know, giant threat. You're even better off when you're leaning into bread and butter issues, inflation, which we have to say too. I mean, she's closed the gap with him on economics, so some of what she's saying is landing. But I can't be so certain about it because their analysis was more right in 2022 than mine was. And I think what Weigel points to is they've effectively already baked into the calculus, like, we're losing Arab American voters. We're just gonna try to make it up somewhere else. We're not going to hit our margins with black men in particular. We're also going to try to make that up somewhere else. And they're saying, all right, well, where do we make that up? The largest group of voters in the country is white people, and white women in particular are the single largest demographic group. So if we can pull in another couple percentage points there, then it's enough to make it work, especially in the blue wall states. And, you know, I can't say definitively that they're wrong about that.
Again, extraordinarily possible. It just seems like such a tremendous gamble. Like, I would, you know, if we're gambling and we're looking at margins and ways to win, it just seems totally different, both the way I would do it and others. I mean, I guess why I come back to it in terms of...
Yeah, like the criticism I would levy on Kamala Harris's strategy here is that it completely neglects to energize her own base, you know, her own base of support that she is reliant on to like get people knocking on doors, to get people phone banking, to get people text banking, you know, the youthful energy that like allowed, you know, Obama to come in on a groundswell of support. Like, she's missing that because her campaign has leaned into this peeling off conservative voter strategy, which is probably in their mind viewed as the safest option. I think that they're trying to go with a safe option rather than what would be a risk rhetorically, I guess. It would be a risk politically to make an alliance with, you know, the left, which is what you would need to do to get that groundswell of support.
Why it's all baked in is we have heard this all so many times. And by the way, I would point out this whole Atlantic article has some serious like issues. Let's put A6, please, on the screen. Nick Ayers, who I covered at the White House and was the deputy chief of staff while General Kelly was also the chief of staff, says, quote, I've avoided commenting on interstaff leaks or rumors, but General Kelly's comments regarding President Trump are too egregious to ignore. I was with each of them more than most, and his commentary is patently false. There is an anecdote in the Atlantic article which alleges that Trump didn't want to pay for this soldier's funeral. The sister of that fallen soldier says that is absolutely not true. The reporter who was in the room during their meeting says absolutely not true.
Who hasn't decided by now? Can't be many. Oh, Zero. Honey, if you're here, you cannot judge what the median voter is capable of. The median voter barely knows that it's the election year. the median voter doesn't know any of the finer points of politics. You know, like this is like walking into like a Baptist church and like thinking that, oh, everyone here knows what transubstantiation is. Everyone here has a really deep theological grounding in what the Trinity represents, right? No, none of them do. If you say the word transubstantiation to most people in an average church, they're just gonna blink at you and be like, "What? I don't know what that means. I've never heard that word in my life." In a very similar way, the median voter has no idea what's going on in politics, and that's why name recognition is huge when it comes to politics. The reason your local politicians really want you to get those yard signs out is because they rely on you generating on those things generating name recognition, so that when the median voter goes to the polls, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I saw that yard sign. I recognize that name. I'm going to vote for them." Like that, literally. Okay? And so when we're talking about this, like, the median voter has no idea what's going on. If you are here, you know more about politics than 90% of the people in the United States. Okay? I guarantee you.
Now, okay, all these people have certainly an incentive, right? But Nick Ayers, it was like some never Trump Mike Pence type guy who I covered at the White House and eventually left. He is not in any way some sort of like MAGA warrior. So when the guy says it's a lie, like, I tend to believe it. At the end of the day, only General Kelly and Donald Trump actually know what was allegedly said in some private conversation. You can make up your own mind.
Can I ask you though, like, we weren't there. I wasn't. Like, it is just like a he said. He said. Does it strike you as outlandish though that Trump could say? Like, to me, it's not that crazy or unimaginable, given some of the things he said in public, that he could have said something like this. And so, you know, it doesn't like blow my mind to imagine him being like, you know, I want some generals like the German generals. That's sounds very much like something Trump would say.
But doesn't that kind of lose when he's like, even listen to what Kelly says, he's like, I want somebody who takes orders. It's like, well, I mean, for example, let's think about what may be the context. Like maybe when Trump was like, hey, you need to withdraw from Syria, and James Mattis and the Pentagon hide the number of troops in Syria and don't withdraw them and execute a lawful order. Like, well, which side would you rather have? The person who actually obeys the commander-in-chief or not? Like, that's what I mean.
But why you got to go to Hitler's generals?
Okay, the point is about, I mean, by the way, you know, I've been trying to avoid this discussion, but, you know, what's his name? Kelly brought up, he's like, oh, did you mean Bismarck's generals? Did you mean the Kaiser's generals? Or did you mean Hitler's generals? There is a discussion to be had about who the best generals were between Bismarck, Kaiser, and Hitler or whatever.
Yeah, because, you know, that's definitely what Donald Trump was interested in doing.
Don't forget, Heinz Guderian was never prosecuted by the Nuremberg trials. He was the chief of staff of the Wehrmacht under Hitler. So all I'm saying is that if you actually look at so-called like the context of I'm trying to issue orders or whatever, yeah, don't you want a general officer who does obey like the whatever the order, a lawful order at least from the president? Probably.
So you also would like Hitler's general?
Trains and bullshit. I'll earn mine the honest way. But thank you for the offer.
No, I didn't say I would like Hitler's generals, but I'm saying it's a stupid.
You're backing him up.
What I'm saying is it's a stupid and a contrite way of being like, oh, it is evidence that he would like pursue a Holocaust or some sort of.
He's literally Sauger. He's literally right now campaigning on his big promise, which is to round up 20 million people for mass deportation. And gee whiz, wouldn't you know it, there's another political figure that campaigned on rounding up millions of people for mass deportation. And you know what? They started that process, and you know what? They got halfway through it and said, oh, wait, it's actually really expensive to deport millions of people. We need a cheaper solution to this problem because we can't keep them in these ghettos and concentration camps forever. So then they did the Holocaust. You know, Nazi Germany, that place.
Sort of like ridiculous in the most smearing way. We have to be adult in the way that we can talk about that conversation.
Of
And
course.
so, like,
We have to be adult in the way we talk about this conversation. You are carrying water right now for a man who is literally campaigning on doing step, I don't know, 3 of the Holocaust.
But
what
we
I just
also-
pointed out with the Syria thing is a perfect example of why I like Schedule F. I'm like, yeah, it's good. Get them out of there. These
But
people
there's-
actively subvert the commander-in-chief.
There's-
Bigger than Trump, too. This is a Biden problem. This is an everybody problem.
The last time we
Yeah.
discussed this, you know, you said you had you thought Trump would be basically a dictator if he could. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I
But-
said Trump
but
would
the-
pursue many of
Yeah, I guess this is part 2 because in the debate that Crystal is referencing, like Sagar did in fact say like, yeah, undoubtedly Donald Trump would be a fascist dictator if he could be, but like our guardrails are strong enough to protect us from that. And now like he's trying to switch his position and be like, oh, it's ridiculous to call him a fascist.
the most outlandish things if he could. But I have enough faith in American institutions that that's not going to happen.
So to me,
yeah, but what they're saying is he's a fascist dictator, Sagar, and your response to that is, yeah, well, he can't be a fascist dictator because our system precludes him from being a dictator, and that's stupid. Because he'll break the system. We've already seen him try to do it and get away with it. And now the Supreme Court is in his pocket. And that's a really bad combo, man. He has Project 2025 to get only yes men around him. And I need to remind you all about this story. Because people keep forgetting this. Trump discussed using a nuclear weapon on North Korea in 2017 and blaming it on someone else. This is also a story from John Kelly. Like, Donald Trump is a guy who's going around talking about how Hitler did some pretty cool things, and how he wishes all of his generals were like Hitler's generals and just did what he told them to do. And he's also talking about wanting to start nuclear wars. And he's doing this in office with the most powerful people in his cabinet. The only reason, by the way, that he wasn't able to do this is because his generals stopped him.
The issue with that analysis to me is that you can't on the one hand say like, oh, well, the institutions held last time and he was held in check by the way, some people like Kelly and Mattis, et cetera, and Milley. But also, I want none of those people in this administration, and I want them to actively destroy the institutions that did keep him in check last time. And also, it also leaves out the fact that the landscape is different since you have the Supreme Court decision that basically says you're immune for acts that you take in office. So to me, that's kind of trying to have it both ways of saying, yeah, well, the institutions held last time, but also I don't want those institutions around this time to hold him in check.
Very easy to explain. In terms of, what is it? Like, what did you reference? Like shoot people in the leg or whatever?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not going to happen even under so-called Schedule F. But they
What are you talking about, dog? He already had Border Patrol kidnapping protesters off the street. What do you... Oh, it's not going to happen. Police would never abuse powers given to them by the president.
the example I gave of, hey, you need to withdraw from Syria, and then they fake the numbers, specifically in the Pentagon, and then give them false information to the commander-in-chief and don't carry out that order, I think that needs to go. That's what I'm talking about.
But why?
I don't think that those are actually mutually exclusive at all.
Why are you so confident that so last time when Trump was like, why can't the military just come in and shoot protesters in the legs or something? That was, what he said, which I believe that he said that. You had Milley in place to be like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole goal of the, Project 2025 and many of the most organized conservative efforts in the meantime is to make sure that you don't have someone like Milley in place who can say, like, no, we're not doing that. That you have, quote unquote, loyalists. Like, that's Trump's number one goal. You see it already, in the choice of like J.D. Vance as vice president. The number one goal is to make sure that the people who are in place this time will do whatever he says, whether it is appropriate, lawful, moral, or not. And so that's why I don't think you can have so much confidence that, like, if he's, wants to go in that direction next time, you're going to have someone in place who's going to be like, no, you can't do that. And, the context of John Kelly, the quotes that we played for you, the audio we played for you, that was in an interview with the New York Times. He apparently, this reporter had been trying to get him on the record for a really long time. And he didn't want to do it. And then what he says triggered him to come out now is Trump's repeated comments about using the military against the enemy within. And for him, a bright red line, which it should be for all of us, in my opinion, in American public life, is turning the military against civilian populations. So when you know what he tried to do last time, when you know what he's saying publicly, when people who know him way better than we do and have been around him and seen him in action way more than we have, when all of them are saying this, like, it's, whether you want to use the F word fascist or not, like, this guy is a wannabe dictator and really could be very dangerous next time around. I can't hand wave that away, given what we've seen him already do at this point.
I understand, but it just substantively seems very different to me than, okay, let's say the theoretical chain of command for you need to go shoot people on American streets. You would need the general to carry it out. You would need to pass it down to the National Guard, and the individual soldiers would actually carry that out. Call me crazy, too optimistic, don't think it's going to happen.
But we did see protesters quite viciously attacked out front of the White House during the Black Lives Matter protest.
Those were by the D.C. police, not on the order of the president or the National Guard.
It was the National Guard. There were federal law enforcement officers there. It was right outside the White House.
Yes, but it was done by the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department.
You're forgetting it was done in the service of enabling that.
She's so over this, like, fascist ghoul doing apologia for January 6th.
Bizarre Trump photo op with the Bible.
Yeah.
So that was done at Trump's behest. And that it was at a time, yes, I know plenty of the protests were violent. It was at a time, they were completely peaceful. And, they were viciously attacked. So to say it's impossible and I can't imagine it happening, et cetera, given what we've already seen, I just don't have that confidence.
And that's fine. People can vote the way that they want. There's a big difference to me between D.C. cops and local cops tear gassing some people to get them out of a square or whatever so Trump can take a photo op and literally trying to shoot people and occupy the country.
There's a difference between gassing people and shooting people. I guess, but not that big of a difference.
Like, if you believe that, then frankly, I have my whole voting guide today. Go vote for Kamala. If you don't believe that and you think it'll work its way out in the way that I laid out in terms of the president's going to issue an order and we're going to actually see the deep state or whatever maybe come to heel and execute these orders, then you should.
Yeah, what you just described there is a dictator. Wait, hey, Sagar and Jetty, what is a dictator?
See the deep state or whatever maybe come to heel and execute these orders, then you should vote for Trump. Or,
like, he's literally saying if the president gives an order, we might finally see, people carry it out. And I need to really remind people that that's not the role of the president is not to give orders and make things happen immediately. That is not the role of a president in our system. That is the role of a dictator if our system is truly broken.
don't. It's up to you. But my point is that it seems very clear that there's obviously like an Overton window within what we're talking about here, and that this idea of literally shooting people or enemy from within camps of U.S. citizens is not going to happen. If you believe it's going to happen, then don't vote for him.
That's a really interesting, very specific turn of phrase. Let's listen to that one more time, shall we?
About here, and that this idea of literally shooting people or enemy from within camps of U.S. citizens is
camps of U.S. citizens. Just a quick look at this here. I seem to recall another group of people who were non-citizens at the time who were put into highly concentrated camps. But they would also fall outside of the exception that Sagar is trying to make here, which is you're not going to see camps full of U.S. citizens. Just camps of those criminal elements from outside of our society. And, well, wouldn't you know it, this is an excerpt from the World Jewish Congress here. The 1935 Nuremberg laws effectively excluded Jews from German society. They were deprived of their German citizenship and prohibited from marrying or having sexual relations with individuals of German or German-related blood. So, I'm just pointing out here that even if you were to apply Sagar's wording here, he would, if you just kind of put him back in time, the wording he chose would not have applied to Jews put in concentration camps for extermination. And I'm not saying that if you asked Sagar point blank if he would support the Holocaust that he would say yes, but I am saying that the rhetoric he is employing is the exact same rhetoric that Nazis used in 1935.
It's not going to happen. If you believe it's going to happen, then don't vote for him. I really don't know what to tell you. Like, that's the argument that I think is very clear. I think that's how the government should work, specifically both within the bounds and then also, disobeying so-called unlawful orders. What I saw when I covered the White House is that General McMaster, General Kelly, and General Mattis willfully undercut the President of the United States and tried at every turn not to execute his foreign policy. My criticism of Trump actually would be that you're such a fool that you allowed them to do so for 2 years and that you didn't use the full force of your office to say, who are you? Get out of here. The guy comes in and says, I want to withdraw from Afghanistan. McMaster's like, no, you need to surge in Afghanistan. And Trump signs that off. So
who would be the new victims? The new victims in our case would be migrants, immigrants. They would be the undocumented and likely many of the documented as well.
That's my criticism of Trump, but that's not the criticism that media and Kelly and all these other people were. It's very much like, oh, you need to trust me, because I was some 4-star general. And that, that's another thing. What, these 4-star generals, like, what, you think they're the greatest people in the world? I covered the Pentagon. They're some of the biggest liars out there. Go look at the way that they all talked about Afghanistan. Like, why would you trust exactly what everything these people say?
Do you really think they'd stop there? Absolutely not. But those would be the first victims. And if use your imagination if you need to figure out more.
This isn't even about General Kelly per se, but it's like anytime some general on CNN or whatever is like talking about his past service and how we're supposed to revere them, I just can't help but think the Afghanistan papers, and I read about him, every single commander of the U.S. forces in Afghanistan lied to the American people. So what credibility do you have with me? So I guess it just comes down to like what you really think is going to happen within this specific situation, and also whether you find these people as eminently credible and you want them to run the country.
So
for me, absolutely not. I don't want these people to run the country.
What do you make, though, of the fact that so many of the people who, who supported, voted for Trump last time, who were lifelong Republicans, who were, as comfortable enough with his leadership that they were willing to serve in his administration, that they all have very similar things to say.
I make of it exactly what I just said. I think that they're they're deep institutionalists, that they have a committed internationalist worldview, having covered and even been in off-the-record conversations with General Kelly, with General Mattis, and all these other people. They saw their role as very specific. We need to protect the republic from Donald Trump. I don't think that these people should be, quote unquote, protecting a Democratic elected leader from anything, or the republic, quote unquote, from a Democratic elected representative. They, like, for example, Mattis saw his entire
Why, like, okay, hypothetically, Sagar, let's enter the world of imagination, okay? So if you can conceive of it, imagine an election between someone who's like, I will fundamentally keep things relatively the same, maybe with some slight improvements, and the opponent of this election, the opposing side, it's a duopolistic system, is an out-and-out fascist. Like, they goose step, they wear the Nazi uniform, they're heiling Hitler, they're doing all that stuff. Do you think that the fascist one that's dressing and Sieg heiling, do you think that one should, that in that case, like, generals shouldn't come forward and say, hey, for the good of our democracy, don't elect this guy because he will end our democratic system? And like Sagar, is that's kind of the position you're taking here, which is that, oh, these figures just shouldn't have any say in any political agency whatsoever. And it's like, they can use their freedom of speech actually to advocate for what they believe in. They have that right too. They just happen to believe that America is under threat from a fascist taking power and are doing their best to avert it, as should we all.
Higher role as stopping Trump's blunt America first instincts. And don't forget, resigned over what? Over the Syria withdrawal order that eventually came to a head. General Kelly, same thing. General McMaster, same thing. They saw their role as basically...
Mike Pence?
So what's up?
How about Mike Pence?
Well, Mike Pence is a different story. And actually, I think that criticism is pretty legitimate. I mean, I've never sat here and been some stop.
But that's the thing
defender.
is what they're saying is honestly very similar to what Mike Pence is saying. And, I would have put a lot more stock in the argument you're making prior to January 6th. And, we were very lucky that at that time, there were still a few people to tell Donald Trump no, that it wasn't even, worse than it ended up being. And it was a horrifying day. It was bad. Like, the attempt to steal an election was really bad. So I just can't be so blasé at this point of like, oh, I don't want anyone around who is an institutionalist. I want Donald Trump to be able to exercise his most unchecked impulses this time around. I just can't at this point.
I get where you're coming from. I laid out my January 6th position.
But it didn't change your...
What, the January 6th?
Your analysis at all?
Oh, of course. But what happened then was the result of the democratic process, right? Well, let's look at the current landscape of January 6th and whether it can happen again. The Electoral Count Act is passed. The vice president can no longer have any ambiguity on certifying the election. 5 out of the 7 swing states are ruled by Democrats, which would require certification under the Electoral Count Act. So that's not going to happen. Number 3, Rudy Giuliani and all of the other legal associates who helped Trump do this are literally bankrupt. Rudy was ordered yesterday to turn his Mercedes over to the Department of Justice. Jenna Ellis had to plead guilty. Sidney Powell had to plead guilty. They're all completely bankrupt. What's his name? John Eastman has basically been run out of town. I believe he's either been disbarred or not. I forget. Rudy's been disbarred. Every person who's been connected to that has suffered massively at the hands of the state, and Trump himself is under federal indictment, and it's not like he didn't pay a price for it. So do I think it's going to happen again? No, I absolutely don't. This is a case of genuinely institutions coming together, I think in a totally legitimate way, of trying to constrain the universe where anything like this could happen. So that's what I would say. I'm not that worried about that playing out like this again. If you want to say an extraordinary circumstance of something different, okay, maybe. Again, I think within the bounds of the system, people have really learned their lesson from January 6th. And if they haven't, then I think they're going to pay a big price for it. So that would be my response on a lot of that. Like, just mechanically, a lot of the things that happened last time.
again, what his counter to this is that, oh, they're just not gonna do the same, alternative slate of elector scheme that they tried last time, which, yeah, of course they're not. They have a different plan this time. Project 2025. Like, the best he has is to, like, obfuscate and, like, point in a different direction and be like, the real villain is that away. And then he, like, takes off running in the opposite direction.
Time cannot happen again. And if they want to sue in state court and lose every single case like they did last time around, be my guest, I guess. You want to waste some legal fees? Fine.
It just feels like you're talking about, okay, the exact set of circumstances that led to the exact situation of January 6th have been somewhat mitigated, so we don't have anything to worry about. And when I think about that, about the events of January 6th and Stop the Steal and all of that, it's less about, okay, can that exact sequence of events happen again? I don't know. Probably not, because he's not president right now, so that makes things that.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously the exact set of circumstances cannot happen. However, we're currently in a really scary time when it comes to elections. I compiled this. Let me see if I can grab this here. Wasn't here. Is it this one? No. Yes, here we go. Here's a very short video from ProPublica about one of the things that the Republican Party is doing right now to try and kind of favor Trump.
I'm Phoebe Petrovic. I'm a reporter for ProPublica and Wisconsin Watch, and I am here in beautiful, dreary Monroeville, Pennsylvania for the Courage Tour. It is sort of a mashup of a Christian tent revival and MAGA rally.
I decree the church will speak the truth. I decree it will be a fair election.
I'm here because I'm investigating how pro-Trump allies are recruiting people who had doubted the 2020 election results to become poll workers this time around in the 2024 election. They're focusing on battleground states like Pennsylvania. The Courage Tour has also come to Arizona, to Michigan, to Wisconsin. And this one was really unique because Senator J.D. Vance, who is running for vice president on the ticket with Trump, was there at a town hall today and spoke a little bit. And I am hoping to chat to some folks.
So can you first tell me your name?
It's Greg Pontonen.
And so you signed up to be a poll worker?
I just did. They approached me and they said, would you like to sign up for paper balloting? And I go, well, that sounds interesting. I think we probably need that. And I go, yeah.
So did you yourself have concerns about the 2020 election?
I do have some concerns about the 2020 elections. And, social media has been hacked into, banks have been hacked into, misinformation comes from Russia, it comes from China, it comes from, various countries. It's very easy to do that. I could see that happening in our election.
Can you just tell me your name, sir?
Sure, it's Bob Mateo.
And how did you get here?
I drove here.
How long was the drive?
It took me about 12 hours, about 10 hours, nonstop.
Oh my God.
Yeah. For me in New Hampshire, or I should say my town in New Hampshire, we're looking for Republican volunteers, people that are willing to go and kind of, well, we're looking for them to count ballots, be ballot counters, but also be stationed at the polls as well.
Like, what's your view on the 2020 election?
I'm disappointed in the results.
Okay.
There are red flags. I don't like, I believe there are red flags.
So it's been a couple of weeks since my investigation at the Courage Tour rally, and I want to share some of my takeaways. So the Republican and Democratic parties have historically recruited poll workers, and almost every state in the country has a legal requirement that says that there must be some amount of partisan balance at the polling places on election day. What's different that we're seeing here are groups that are outside of the parties making a really concerted effort to recruit poll workers themselves. So the Line of Judah is one of those groups. We saw them at the Courage Tour, and they say that they want to be the Christian version of the NRA.
Yeah, so really what we're seeing here is like a very precipitous rise in Christian nationalism embedding with the Republican movement. And one of the scary things is that it's getting embedded on the local level, on the nitty-gritty level of poll workers. And that could be a vector of some underhanded dealings in the upcoming election. My gut reaction to this is that planting these poll workers in swing states is part of a drive to then legally contest the results in each of those swing states in an effort to essentially have like 5 or 6 Florida scenarios. Florida from the year 2000, from the 2000 election, where Florida was decided by the Supreme Court to have gone for George W. Bush. And despite the fact that I believe subsequent recounts showed that Al Gore actually won Florida, which would have would have been a different course of history there. So I think what we're looking at is laying the groundwork for possible legal contests to the 2024 election, just with the testimony of poll workers themselves and having more poll workers on hand to, throw wrenches into the whole shebang. So it is some pretty not great developments. Usually I'm fine with people becoming poll workers because most people who become poll workers just do so because they believe in our democratic process. But stacking poll workers with Republicans from Christian nationalist recruitment efforts seems like a very ill omen to me.
They're traveling to swing states with the Courage Tour with Lance Wallnau to recruit conservative Christian poll workers. Many of the groups that we looked at had connections to Donald Trump and his allies. So take the Line of Judah, for example. We found a business filing filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State that said that an attorney working with them was Miles Terry, whose business or law firm partner actually represented Trump during his first impeachment. To read the full investigation, head to the link in our bio.
Lance Wallnau did not respond to multiple calls, emails, or a list of detailed questions. Joshua Standifer, founder of Line of Judah, said via email, "Our objective is to encourage Christians to engage peacefully, ethically, and legally within the system."
Love and solidarity, comrades.
Yo, Manic Anti-Fascist, thank you for subscribing with Prime. I really appreciate that. Any suggestion that we are encouraging inappropriate behavior is simply false and part of an ongoing effort to discourage Christians from participating in civic processes. Ah, yes, the ongoing effort of discouraging the most prominent religious belief in America from engaging in the civic process. Miles Terry did not respond to calls or requests for comment. Okay. But yeah, there are concerns. Let's go back to this. We're almost done with this this exchange here.
Makes things different right there. But is that indicative of the type of thing that he can foment when he's at his worst? Yes. And is that indicative of, when you put that together with what many people who were in his administration, including his own vice president, who stood by him through everything up until the very end, what they say about his worst impulses, I think that is very troubling and should be taken seriously. And then, the last thing I'll say, and we can move on to Kamala's town hall and take a look at what she's saying in her closing pitch and also some of the latest polls. But the last thing I'll say is also, you do have a different landscape now with the Supreme Court really saying, like, you have carte blanche. And so even that theoretical institutional check of, the highest court in the land is now effectively gone. So if you're taking that away, you're taking away any of the people who were institutionalists who were writing memos to him saying, like Don McGahn writing memos to him saying, listen, you cannot just turn the Department of Justice into your own like toy to prosecute your political enemies. You just literally can't do that. You take those people out of the picture, and I think it is a dangerous situation and one that people should take into consideration. Now, I'm not telling people how they have to vote.
Honestly, Crystal's doing well here, and I don't really see how she could have. I mean, I don't understand how she puts up with Sagar. I would be losing it by this point. Like 30 minutes of going back and forth about whether or not a guy whose chief of staff called him a fascist is in fact a fascist.
Or that this has to be their number one issue, etc. But, to factor in the people who were in the room with him, who saw how he operates and how he thinks, and to take into consideration what we've seen happen and his own public comments, I don't think it's like deranged or insane to take those things very seriously given what we've seen at this point.
I don't think it's deranged.
Does she always not look at him? I think she's avoiding eye contact because she's mad.
Deranged or insane, people can make up their minds for themselves. Hey, if you like that video, hit the...
And no one did, because you were in it. God. Sagar is really just a Weasley little fascist. And honestly, if you find people buying into this rhetoric of like, America's institutions are so strong, they can survive another 4 years of Trump. They did before, they can again. You're talking with a fascist or someone who is at the very least ambivalent about fascism itself. Because frankly, like, his arguments were bad. And if you know anything about Donald Trump, you know that he's a fascist. And, we'll probably go over fascism again. Maybe I'll do a segment just reading the essay fascism and put that up on the YouTube, and maybe that way more people will actually have read the very short essay that Umberto Eco wrote defining fascism. And it's a useful bar. It's a useful bar to have because most people have no idea what fascism is. Everyone has done Echo, though. Have they? Because, again, the median voter has no idea what fascism is. To the median voter, fascism is something from, World War II movies. It's not real in a tangible way to the median voter. But yeah, Donald Trump's a fascist. If you're assisting him in taking power in any way, shape, or form, you are complicit with fascism, and it will immiserate not just the United States but the entire world. The entire world will pay that price if a fascist is allowed to become the president of the United States. So, get out there, knock on doors for your local candidates. Do phone banking, do text banking. It's really, really important work that we need people to volunteer to do. And please just talk with your friends and family and get them out to vote. Either early voting, vote by mail, or on November 5th, because we need as many people out there as we can get. Let's do this.